Good day, everyone. I am Cyril Irish G. Tibayan,
And I am Zairina or Morga.
and we are about to present the art of the post-war period. So, do you have any idea about the art of the post-war period? If you don't, then listen.
Let's start. But before that, what is post-war period? Post-war period is the interval immediately following the end of the war, or it happens after the war. It was the interwar period or interbellum, or the period between World War I and World War II. And the mostly considered post-war period is after the mat of the World War II because it is the beginning of a new era for all countries and is merely defined a time period to refer to art created from 1945, differentiating from modern and impressionist before and contemporary after.
In 1945, the art of the post-war period began. It is important to observe how big of a part art had played during the post-war period, consequently leaving behind a sea of brilliant artworks. It was 1945 and the World War II was over. However, art always responds in some way, and so the vantage points from which to observe it were polarized as well, which gave birth to a vast number of concurrent streams. Therefore, we can see the most obvious difference between the tendencies toward abstraction suggested by the pro-democratic American high culture and the European post-war art, which fell under the slight influence of figuration and realism propagated by the Soviet Union. And then, there was everything else in between. Pop art, which employed aspects of mass culture, unlike abstract expressionism. Fluxus as a Dada-derived anti-art nihilist movement. Art brut or outsider art, New Realism in France, and all the other forms of realism, which emerged in Great Britain. Socialist realism in the Russian Soviet Republic, etc. It seems that the post-war dunghill was a very fertile ground to start from, and lucky for us, some of the most ingenious artists were eager to make a new history. Let's see which of the paintings from this era of avalanche and the post-trauma could be the most pertinent ones from today's point of view and take a quick survey of the most iconic artworks made in our recent history in times of crisis which we cannot fully understand, but we could perhaps compare it to the crisis of our own. We all know that every art we considered, had always played as a big part of any time, period, or history. Art of the post-war period contains abstract expressionism, optical art, pop art, minimalism, conceptual art, and performance art.
Abstract Expressionism, a post-World War II art movement in American painting, developed in New York City in the 1940s. It was the first specifically American movement to achieve international influence and put New York at the center of the Western art world, a role formerly filled by Paris. Although the term abstract expressionism was first applied to American art in 1946 by the art critic Robert Coates, it had been first used in Germany in 1919 in the magazine Der Sturm regarding German expressionism. From its origin in the late 19th century to today, abstraction has manifested through the years. It is an incredibly versatile genre that has allowed for its vast evolution and can now be categorized in hundreds of different ways and yet still be classified as abstract art. There are different classifications of abstract art. There are surrealism, dadaism, cubism, fauvism, suprematism, art informal, neoplasticism, day still, lyrical abstraction, color-filled, post-painterly abstraction, and even minimalism, to name a few. Wassily Kandinsky is the most famous and most influencer when it comes to abstract painting, and he is most known with his significant work Composition X. It is his last in his lifelong series of compositions. He sought to culminate his investigation into the purity of form and expression through this work. Having used the color black sparingly in his practice up to this point, it has been critiqued that this work is both evocative of the cosmos as well as the darkness of foreshadowing nearing the end of his life.
Optical art, a style of a visual art that uses optical illusions. Op art works are abstract with many better known pieces created in black and white. Typically, they give the viewer the impression of movement, hidden images, flashing, and the vibrating patterns or of swelling or warping. The effects created by op art range from the subtle to the disturbing and disorienting. Optical painting used a framework of purely geometric forms as the basis for its effects and also drew on color theory and the sociology and psychology of perception. Leading figures were Brigitte Riley, Jesus Raphael Soto, and Victor Basarel. Basarel was one of the originators of art. Soto's work often involves mobile elements and points out the close connection between Optical kinetic art and has different classification, the kinetic art and the luminous kinetic art. So this is one of the famous optical art of Victor Basel. This is what we called Sivras in year 1937.
Pop art, an art movement that emerged in the United Kingdom and the United States during the mid to late 1950s. The movement presented a challenge to traditions of fine art by including imagery from popular and mass culture, such as advertising, comic books, and mundane mass produced objects. One of its aims is to use images of popular as opposed to elitist culture in art, emphasizing the banal or kitschy elements of any culture, most often through the use of irony. Pop art movement aimed to blur the boundaries between high art and low culture. The concept that there is no hierarchy of culture and the art may borrow from any source has been one of the most influential characteristics of pop art. There are different types of pop art. There are comic strip, commercial printing, meticulously literal paintings, and silkscreen paintings. The most iconic work of pop art, Marlene Diptych in 1962 by Andy Warhol, the best known and most influential artist of the pop art movement to the extent that he is known as the Pope of Pop.
Next is minimalism. Minimalism is an extreme form of abstract art developed in the USA in the year of 1960 and typified by artworks composed of simple geometric shapes based on the square and the rectangle. Minimalism or minimalist art can be seen as extending the abstract idea that art should have its own reality and not be an imitation of some other thing. We usually think of art as representing an aspect of the real world, a landscape, a person, or even a tin of soap, or reflecting an experience such as an emotion or feeling. With minimalism, no attempt is made to represent an outside reality. The artist wants the viewer to respond only to what is in front of them. The medium or the material used from which it is made and the form of the work is the reality. Minimalism can be a painting, sculpture, print, photography, or collection. Frank Stella, a famous minimalist painter, said, "What you see is what you see." And this is one of his artwork. The Dive Fan Hack of 1959. This minimalism artwork was named after the official marching song of the Nazis, but appears to be meaningless with the exception of its title. It is a work within a large series of block paintings by Stella. In this painting, the lighter lines are in packed raw canvas that was left blank between its broad black stripes. The monochromatic work is one of the best known works to challenge the abstract expressionism movement.
Conceptual art. Conceptual art is art for which the idea or concept behind the work is more important than the finished art object. It emerged as an art movement in the 1960s, and the term usually refers to art made from the mid 1960s to mid 1970s. Conceptual art, also referred to as conceptualism, is art in which the concept or idea involved in the work take precedence over traditional aesthetic, technical, and material concern. One of the main theorists of conceptual art, Saul Levitt, said, "Ideas alone can be works of art. They are in a chain of development that may eventually find some form. All ideas need not be made physical." He conceived many different pieces. Some were never built, while others were ultimately given physical form. The most famous conceptual art is a fountain in 1917 that have replica in 1964 by Marcel Duchamp, the father of conceptual art. There's a saying, no matter what form the artwork may finally have, it must begin with an idea. It is the process of conception and realization with which the artist is concerned.
Conceptual art contains fluxus, conceptual photography, land art, performance art, art and language, arte povera, video, and social sculpture. Performance art. An artwork or art exhibition created through actions executed by the artist or other participants. It may be live, through documentation, spontaneously, or written, presented to a public in a fine art context. Traditionally interdisciplinary, also known as artistic action, it has been developed through the years as a genre of its own in which art is presented live. It had an important and fundamental role in 20th century avant-garde art. It only became widely used in the year of 1970s. The history of performance in the visual art is often traced back to futurist productions and the cabarets in the year of 1910s. Performance art can happen anywhere in any type of venue or setting. Performance arts consist of dance, music, opera, theater and musical theater, magic, illusion, mime, spoken word, puppetry, circus arts, performance art, and work live to audience. And this is one of the example of performance art. This is circus art entitled Performance Still, year 1985 to 1995 by Mona Hatom. And this is the end of our report. Thank you for listening. And again, we are the reporters of Art of Post-War Period. I am Cyril Irish G. Tibayan and she is Cyrina R. Morga. Thank you for listening.